So many people have been discussing this recently ever since Toys for Bob was laid off by Activision because of course they would, given the circumstances of the gaming industry at the moment, about the current state of 3D platformers. Now some have tried to analyze the situation here on social media or on YouTube and figuring out the prospects of it all, while others are quick to say that it's all over for them and want that obvious view revenue here because when people are freaking out, that's when they're gonna wanna listen to some dumb opinion out there, I guess. However, my dumb opinion, and I guess current position in all this, isn't to obviously go all apocalyptic on you guys, nor be as analytical as I possibly can, but rather to just be as neutral to the position as possible. The way I do have plans of doing that is obviously by just reverse engineering the whole situation in the first place and asking the very fundamental question of, well, why are they even in the state that they are in? Or for the dramatic flair here on YouTube, why are 3D platformers dying in the first place? And so the answer to that question is honestly very layered, as it does take a lot more of observational skills from the current standings of the gaming industry to also the marketing and advertising and economics flair and all that kind of stuff, especially given the recent layoffs from the big game developers themselves. And to go back to the case of Toys for Bob as the entire opener of this video, you know, the people who were able to revive the glory days of both Crash and Spyro as of recent, it really sucks for them the most because those games were the major heavy hitters back when they released. Spyro's Reignited trilogy really gave us what made Spyro such a classic in the PS1 days, all fully remastered for all modern consoles, and Crash 4 showed a lot of promise in the sense that the 3D platformer genre was coming back, especially with how well made those games were. And if we want to extend the hand a little bit more with this case study, we can also say the same with the Klonoa Fantasy Revere series that brought Klonoa back on the map for a brief period back in 2022, and the remake of Pac-Man World with a Repack remake, again, both having positive spotlights when they initially released. Especially Klonoa's front, because man, nobody really knows about him, and I am super happy that we can kind of have that conversation with him nowadays. I definitely gotta do a review on this franchise sometime in the near future. And obviously, we can't forget that classics like Mario and Sonic, and also Kirby now that I think about it, with how those 3D games have continued to prove that they will be around and kicking for quite a long time, especially on Sonic's front with Sonic Frontiers, Kirby's for Forgotten Land, and you know, Odyssey with Mario, as well as Bowser's Fury mode with the 3D Land Switch port. But again, the whole entire issue in the first place here, and why we're even asking this question in the first place is, well, if these games exist in the first place, why aren't developers on other ends of the spectrum in the gaming industry? Why aren't they looking into this a little bit more? And why are they completely muddied by the prospects of making, well, a video game? What I mean by this, before somebody is going to be jumping the gun in the comment section here, is that nowadays, most games that aren't like the Xenoblade Chronicles franchise, Persona, any other JRPG, or Nintendo IP, or hell, Sega, thanks to the Big Five announcement they did back on the Game Awards, most of these studios aren't focused on making a video game that is enjoyable and quirky. But of course, with some of the exceptions to the rules, like Ratchet & Clank on, you know, Insomniac game side of things, most AAA studios nowadays simply just cater to the whole multiplayer live service nonsense that seemingly has made a very massive stronghold in the past few years, or because they think people nowadays are just looking to play a more cinematic experience, which further boosts the whole budget issues of an IP, and then when that IP ends up flopping and not making the money that they were trying to invest in the first place, and then layoffs occur and everybody starts to lose their jobs. That's why, in my personal opinion, 3D platformers are essentially dying, because no one is bothering to make actual video games that have a sense of longevity. Now, a lot of people are going to be asking, okay, what do you mean by this longevity if we are talking about 3D platformers? And to give an example, let's go to the early 2000s, because that was riddled with 3D platformers back in the day. You had the obvious, like Ratchet & Clank on PS2 side of things, you had Crash, you know, and some here and there, Spyro was a massive thing, and you had new ones like Sly Cooper, Jak and Daxter on Naughty Dog's front, and Ape Escape, again, to name a few. There was even Rayman. You guys remember Rayman? Of course you don't remember Rayman. See, that's what I mean. The early 2000s was just filled to the brim with these guys. Now, if you were to ask me this, everyone of course remembers those games even years after not playing the games, compared to a one and done experience like The Last of Us, because those games were wacky in their art style and were very fun in their gameplay components. And because of that mentality of wanting to replay and the longevity is why you see a lot of praise in the indie scene of all places, where you have games like, recently with Rolling Rascal, you got Spark the Electric Jester, and Hat in Time, where those games were all about experiencing the gameplay rather than the story itself. Now, it's not to say that the stories aren't afterthoughts in all of this in the development cycle, but they're just something that is an additional thing to the overall experience, because they just want to ensure you are engaged with the world through the controls and movement of the characters, rather than just building a story arc and say, oh yeah, by the way, this is a video game. And because of the latter is why so many AAA games lost that touch, and why their creativity specifically is as broken as ever, where it's all about making the most realistic game possible with the unreal graphics and whatnot, or to make the most cinematic piece of media ever consumed. But that's more of another topic than anything, if I'm being honest. But in this regard, I think the answer to why all 3D platformers are dying, at least in the current standings of the modern gaming industry, also gives us a window of opportunity as the consumer to let developers know what we actually want from an IP, whether it's a returning one or a whole new one. Like, dude, I can't even begin to explain how much people really, and I mean really, want more Crash games, or at the very least, see the revival of franchises like Jak and Daxter and Sly Cooper, the former being the most requested given how much free time Naughty Dog clearly have up their goddamn sleeves. And trust me, they got the free time, that's for sure. If they're able to remaster The Last of Us Part 2, yeah, that says a lot. And as for others out there, like Ubisoft with Rayman and Ape Escape again on PlayStation's front, the same can even be said for their returns. And we also know how we feel about their current prison Banjo-Kazooie is at the moment, because yeah, Xbox is never going to bring them back. Let's face reality here, folks. But again, to not lose sight of the goal of this entire topic, the essence of why 3D platformers are dying is honestly very true. Video game developers are losing sight of the idea of what made a video game fun in the first place, and they don't look to really see where the money is going, because they are at the verge of playing it safe. Which, if you honestly asked me, that's just being very, very dumb. After all, the whole foundation of gaming is built on taking risks, and 3D platformers are, in my opinion, the very essence of risk-taking in video game development. Some of these games make platforming revolutionary and engaging, with the grind rail mechanics in Sonic Adventure 2, to the whole collectathon gimmick with Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie onwards, to making precise platforming and tight controls with the Crash games. 3D platformers have shown that they innovate on making games work. And without these guys, the majority of games today would not be developed in the manner that they are in. Like, you wouldn't be able to see the scope of movement and mobility for a character or their interaction with the environment had it not been for 3D platformers. And it's an honest to God shame that no one sees this nowadays. Like, it doesn't hurt not to innovate on these. It doesn't hurt to try and bring back these guys, especially in an era of gaming where everything is being brought back, from remakes to remasters to all that kind of stuff. It doesn't hurt to dip your toes in that regard. But you know what? I did say that I was trying to be as neutral in my position as possible, but as someone who also grew up with 3D platformers, from Mario Sunshine to Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, I do feel sorry for how harshly they're being treated, obviously outside of Nintendo and Sega. Despite what I did say though, the floor is also yours for the taking. Like, in the comments down below, I want to see your ideas and your thoughts and your overall perspective about 3D platformers as well. Like, we're all video game consumers at the end of the day, and this conversation can open a lot of people's eyes in the gaming development department, and if it's shouted loud enough, it could really change the course of gaming industry as a whole. And I sure hope it does, I genuinely hope it does. But aside from all that, it's time to say farewell to all of you guys. I'll see you all in the next one, of course. And I really want to see your thoughts in the comments section and all that. And do what you got to do as well, because what I'm about to do now is state the obvious, because it's the end of the video. And I'm about to say, roll the outro, baby.